All right, you guys ready? Okay, you are live on KUAW on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, everybody, listen here. Thank everybody for tuning in once again. It's been a beautiful Tuesday. Today is June the 8th, 2021. You've tuned in to Street Therapy KC. This is your host, Mr. Chris Jackson, CJ. Today I got a show that's with some folks here, kind of new to my program, but definitely not new to the city. And I want to introduce everyone here, and we'll jump right into our conversation. So I guess I'll let you folks introduce yourselves, and then we'll go right into it.
You want me to start?
And you can, yes, ma'am, you can start.
I am Khadija Hardaway. I'm the lead organizer, one of the lead organizers for Justice for Wyandotte in Wyandotte County. And I am also the social action chair for Grand Chapel AME Church at 7th and Tremont in Kansas City, Kansas.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And Brother Cecil, if you want to jump in there.
Sure. My name is Cecil Watry. I am a licensed clinical social worker and therapist. I am a board director of Hickman Mills School District, C1 School District. I am also a member of It's a Time for Justice, as well as the lead builder and founder of the Kansas City Black Mental Health Initiative.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, sir. And Reverend Darren Lamont Edwards, sir.
Activism, where you, not so much is it tied to the church and not so much through, and they try to control the narrative by bringing about more stimulus. So yes, that's what's happening.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask Mr. George Walker. Is there any way on this Zoom can we swap the pictures around, or is it kind of set that way so we can get the pastor on the main screen? So I don't know if we can do that on Zoom, but anyway, because we see Mr. Walker. So Pastor Edwards, in your response as a man of faith, what's the I guess the church's responsibility, or what is
the killing, and initiated a conversation about the video that they had been given. And so we proceeded to look at that video, analyze it, and make sure that we were all viewing and under the same assumption that this Malcolm was murdered. And so from there, we began to reach out to the pastors to, even though, we've had some discrepancies in the community, we felt like they were the best people to reach out to help us get the exposure that Malcolm needed, and to understand that the police department and the highway patrol were not being transparent about what had happened to Malcolm, and that the community needed a better view and understanding of what took place. And so that's why I stepped in to assist the family, one, so that they wouldn't have to come out and speak, and that young adolescent child would have all the protection that she needed. Secondly, that the accountability and justice could start to take a form. We really didn't know what that looked like, other than we know that we were looking at what we viewed as an execution. And so those were the steps we took forward, and the pastors then picked up this situation to lead it. And we couldn't be more grateful. And I'm speaking of the family.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, you know, we look at these shootings, and whether it's from our community or whether it's folks that are supposed to protect our community, and we look at these and we say, you know, I heard something someone said the other day. Said it's almost to the point where it's been commonplace and we're being desensitized to it, you know, and it's almost to the point where you see it over and over and over again, and you know you're almost getting tired of saying enough's enough, and what do we do from here, and you know whose fault is it, and you know. It seems like that seems to be the common conversation that we have often when we see these things, you know. So, brother Cecil, what would that do to a person's mentality, man? You know, that will see these things. I mean, we see it on the movies, you know, and I mean, unfortunately, we see it on Facebook. You know, we see it on Facebook Live. We see it on a lot of these things. You know, it almost seems like it almost wears you down or makes you callous to the point where you see it over and over again. You figure, I'm in another one, but you know, I guess we gotta realize that is a life. That's just not another number or another one. That is a family member. That is a loved one. That is somebody's son, daughter, you know, so on and so forth. What would you say to that, Brother Cecil Wentry? You're on mute, brother.
Thank you. I would say the desensitization has to do with how our brains make habit or habituate. Habituation is a big word, but in other words, when you are experiencing a traumatic or even just any type of event, and you are experiencing that event consistently, the brain responds by releasing the same chemicals over time. After your brain gets acclimated to it or you habituate to it, then you don't respond with the level of stimulus. You don't have the systemic response that you would have from the initial event. The more times that the event happens, the more you habituate and the more desensitized you become. So in that aspect, if you live in a place that sees a lot of violence, you may have habituated to seeing violence and be able to not have such a visceral reaction to it.
Is that the same analogy as the frog being in a hot pot that kind of warms up and then he doesn't tell that the pot is hot until it's too late?
Correct. And what ends up, you're fine. Much to Ms. Harvey's point, what you see happen in the community, and in retrospect to that, is you see activists try to sensationalize or try to bring more of awareness to this. And over times they can, just like with a parent who grew up poor and has, they don't want their kids to grow up poor, so they make sure they have everything they have, but they often overcorrect. So we end up having activists who get a hint of the desensitization and the habituation, and they try to control the narrative by bringing about more stimulus. So yes, that's what's happening.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask Mr. George Walker. Is there any way on this Zoom can we swap the pictures around, or is it kind of set that way so we can get the pastor on the main screen? So I don't know if we can do that on Zoom, but anyway, because we see Mr. Walker. So Pastor Edwards, in your response as a man of faith, what's the I guess the church's responsibility, or what is the church is saying? Is a difference from, you know, church and state, or church and politics, church, or is this something that the church could actually kind of weigh in on?
Well, first of all, Chris, thanks for inviting me. And let me say, every time I hear Cecil speak, I never want to speak behind Cecil. He's so deep, you know. I mean, he knows how to lay it out there perfectly. Yeah. But let me let me say this. There's been a number of organizations and certainly activists that have been doing this work much longer than I have. But here's what I will say is that I'm glad that the Black church is relevant again. If there's anything that has, I believe this moment means, is that the activists and the people of the street asked the church to come alongside. What we want to be careful to do is that we don't become the church of the 60s and try to take over. We just want to come alongside and work together to bring about results. I think the times have changed, the dynamics have shifted. And so, you know, I'm willing to see the Black church take the second seat, the third seat. We don't have to have the first seat. I think the first seat was needful in the 50s and the 60s because that was the hub of social justice. Everything went through the church. You got educated through the church. You know, you learned how to read and write through the church. Well, times have now changed, you know, through all kinds of migrations. Things have happened where over time, the church got caught up in building its kingdom instead of the community. And so the church lost her voice. And so to see now that the activists, certainly in Kansas City, have said, Pastor Edwards, Pastor Cleaver, Pastor Lindsay, come work alongside of us was huge for us because we had not seen that in the movements in Kansas City lately.
Yeah. I think that's important. I'm sorry.
If I could chime in, I would say, you know, for all of us, it was a huge risk. But I'm going to disagree with the pastor just a little bit, just from the perspective of my age and where I come from and how I've learned history. What I know about the church, especially, and this is not to say anything about any other church, but especially the Baptist and the AME churches, is that they started the modern day civil rights movement way back when Richard Allen separated from the Methodist Church. And there has been some great activists. I mean, almost any activist you can think of has come out of the churches. I think America and its propaganda has done a great job of attacking the church and, you know, putting a different narrative on the church. I think I sit in a place where I've sat with wisdom a long time and I understand young people. And I think both of them are still needed. I think the church, for me, does excellent work when it comes to missionary and making sure that people are fed and making sure that mental capacity is kind of intact. But the one problem I do feel like is missing is that pastors are not as pronounced as they used to be. And it sends a signal of being fearful of the movement. And that is the talk of a lot of people. And that's an issue that I think we need to talk out and come to an understanding of, like you said, Pastor Edwards, what does this new movement look like? And how do the activists come to the forefront with the pastors supporting them, if that's what the new look is? But I would have to say that the church has been there all the time. We wouldn't have the simple freedoms that we have if it had not been for them. And it should be noted thoroughly in history, but it's not.
Yeah, that's a great point, because you talk about that, you know, and oftentimes is, you know, to your point and also Pastor Edwards' point, you know, when a lot of those things happened, it was in the church's basement. You know, when the community got together, it was in the church's basement. You know, when they fed people, it was in the church's basement. So the church was very much involved, and I think the church is involved now, but it's to a different capacity, because I think right now, as people have gotten a little disheartened with the church and things like that because of things that they've seen and heard and things like that. And you know, and rightfully so. But on the flip side, you know, the church is the staple that's always been there, that's always going to be there. And I think there's a common ground that we have to get to that kind of meshes the two, because both of them is needed. Prayer is needed and action is needed. So much prayer is needed and much action is needed. So both of them are definitely very much, important.
Chris, just want to weigh in just a little bit.
Sure.
So in the 60s, when we did have the Freedom Riders, we also had organizations like SNCC, which eventually kind of manifested into to what I would call secular activism, where not so much is it tied to the church and not so much through organized religion, but rather the Panthers kind of derived from those origins, in the aspect of looking at the secular approach, so not just the philosophy of Marxism or even so much of the issue of social justice, but rather the ability to look at what when we talk about the word revolution, what we're actually talking about, what it is to be a revolutionary. Now, the church has been involved, but even so much in the aspect of other religious entities such as the Nation of Islam. And all these things stem back to the aspect of what we're all trying to address, which is the social justice aspect. I can agree in the aspect of what both Miss Hardaway as well as Edward said in the aspect of simply the approach of justice seeking transparency and accountability. When we talk about what we're essentially talking about, we're asking for transparency and accountability. And the thing is that self-awareness is typically the first step in our ability to be able to move on. So if we were to be transparent about secular activism, we can kind of point out the good, the bad, the ugly. If we were to look at what has taken place within the church in its activism, we can also point out the good, the bad, the ugly. I think at this point right now, the driven purpose is to actually work in a place where we find solidarity, where these groups have a like mind, where we all kind of center around the why. It's the why we're all here, why we are all trying to address these issues, and what we stem to kind of get off of them. As Malcolm X said, that we're living in a time of revolution, a time where there's got to be a change, and people with power have misused it, which is what we've discussed. And there's got to be a change. A better world has to be built, and it has to be built through, and the only way it can be built is through extreme methods. What he says is he will join with anyone, no matter, he didn't care what color they are, or even so much as at the time of this debate at Oxford University in '64, where he referred to coming back to the States and working with church members and working with those who he had also had diminished as being problematic. So with that being said, I think what we're trying to do in this aspect of moving forward is be able to find the common ground of being revolutionary through solidarity, which will have to have the church, which will have to have the activist, the organizer, and the revolutionary all sitting at the same table in order to come to the common goal of actually seeking justice, not just for Malcolm, but for the many of countless others who have lost their lives to oppression.
Yeah, 100%. And I think when we look at the ground level of it, when we say activism, when we say revolutionary, when we say faith leader and things like that, when you use those words, I think we need to get a great understanding of what those words are, because sometimes when people hear, revolutionary, people think radical, fight, rough, in your face, and things like that. When you hear revolutionary, it's like, but revolutionary is a world changer. Yes, revolutionaries are aggressive because they have to be. Yes, because oftentimes if you're not aggressive, people won't listen to you.
But what I would say about what Pastor Edward said earlier about letting the activists take the lead is that, there is a back and forth with leadership where there's a time where you have to listen and there's a time that you have to talk, right? Yeah. And I think what is unique about the situation that we're in is that the pastors are leading us, whether he says it or not, but they're giving us all the space to have this platform that if you are the stronger in this area or weaker in this area, no matter how it is, we're all getting an opportunity to be at this platform, to be at the forefront with a unified message. And I think for Kansas City, that's something that, I pray for, hope for a long time. I know a lot of other people, no matter how it's come about, has also prayed for this moment. And so being vulnerable enough to put yourself in this space to make these things happen for all of us is just a new new era in a movement. So, you know, in a lot of ways, I second what pastors say, but as far as the history, we just got to understand and read more and get that information from solid historians that can keep, you know, the blackness to the forefront and the whitewashing out of it, you know.
Pastor, what are your thoughts, sir?
Well, I mean, I think that's what we do. I think if you look at what you have assembled, even in this space, you have Cecil, who's the cognitive, you have Khadijah, who's the emotive, and what the pastors are the collaborative. We bring that together. So what we do is maximize our influence. We know what we have. We know what we bring to the table. We bring together massive influence. We're the kind of the big voice. And what has been unique about the challenge, you know, to be very open and vulnerable, is that we try to do a partnership with KCPD, what we call standing in the gap, in the bridge. Mm-hmm. You know, Maya Angelou has a quote that simply says, "When you know better, do better." And so, you know, for me, I've never been one to just take somebody's thought or position. Hey, this is how it is. I got to see it for myself. You know, and so we launched out to try to see if it was possible that faith leaders could do something to kind of bridge this gap. Well, now we know what they knew, you know, and so now that we know better, we do better. And so now that we know what they knew, now we do better and say, okay, there's got to be some radicalism, there's got to be some revolutionary, there's got to be some activism, there's got to be some, and I'm gonna use a strong word, abolition that needs to take place so that systemic change can truly change. There's no question about it.
Yeah. Some agitation.
Absolutely.
Good agitation.
Yeah. Good agitation. Yeah.
Good trouble. Good trouble.
Good trouble.
You know, go ahead, Cecil.
What I was able to speak to the pastors as well as Ms. Hardaway after a press conference, and I commend Pastor Edwards on what he's saying, regardless of, and I'm always going to put it in clinical terms, but like having a scientific mindset. In order to, if anybody's seen anything with this pandemic, we've seen the experts sit and once new data is presented, provide that new data and the clarifications of what happened. This is no different in the aspect that these, and also I want to back up. I'm a radical. Radical by this, we big on words. I'm big on definition of words. Radical, and it's a mathematical term. It means getting to the root of. So to be radical is not to be necessarily violent or aggressive, but also to be assertive. To be able to build relationships so that we can have those higher expectations, which is what I expressed today. In order for me to have a good relationship, in order for me to have high expectations of the pastor or anybody else who is in this movement space, I have to have a relationship with that person. If I have a bad relationship and high expectations, I'm a dictator, I'm authoritarian, and I'm literally perpetuating the same oppression that I get out of the people we're trying to address. If I have a good relationship and low expectations, for instance, if the pastor stayed in community with KCPD after all this has come forward, then you are enabling them to continue the same behavior in which they have. So allowing the preachers to step out of the preacher mindset to step into a scientific one where it's based on the new data presented so that they don't fall into cognitive dissonance, which is what people who don't look like us do all the time, where they are so stuck in their core values that when they're presented the new information, they stick with it. Franz Fanon, a black psychiatrist, coined the term cognitive dissonance because that's what he saw in our counterpart. That's what he sees in the oppressor. He sees cognitive dissonance, where they have a core belief that is set, whereas new information is presented. It makes them so uncomfortable that they rather just stick to their core beliefs. We cannot afford to do that.
Yeah, that's well said. Yeah, you can't afford to. And have a back and forth, and you can't afford really to just fall back into laziness. You know what I'm saying, or slugging. Um, so, Khadijah, what's the family? What are they receiving as far as information from the police officers, and what are they getting? Are they getting any information or anything?
They're getting the same information that the Highway Patrol and the police department has given to the media, and that's basically that Malcolm Johnson's death is still under an investigation by the Highway Patrol. Our call has been for Gene Peters Baker to charge all 5 officers. And, the pay that they're getting, it needs to be suspended. I mean, at some
point, they're still on the force. They're not even on administrative leave.
Well, I think 2 of them are on administrative leave with pay, as far as I know. The other 3, and there were actually 6 officers involved in that call. The 6th officer was a female that was sent out for a taser and returned back. And if you noticed her in the film, she's the only cop standing on her feet and giving great emotion to what took place inside of that store. So the family is, under clear assumption that the police department, the Highway Patrol, and the authorities just won't be transparent, and that we do need a federal investigation to come in. They also want for Rick Smith to resign effective immediately. I mean, for the idea that you didn't want to look at the video, and now that you have 3 videos in your possession, and that that there's serious discrepancies about the patterns and practices that you presented that day, I think it's time that you step down. And, the main thing for us is just making sure that the adolescent child has a fair chance at life losing her dad.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna shift gears just a little bit here. So I think Mayor Quentin Lucas is working on a bill. I don't know if it passed, and maybe it did pass, about defunding police. And I think they did that in Atlanta, and they had an issue with police officers not wanting to respond to certain calls in certain areas and things like that. That's dangerous in our areas, because obviously, as much as we have issue with officers, and not all of them, but as much as we kind of have an issue with police officers that police us over police us, this defunding situation doesn't mean taking away the money from the police officer, which people think that's what it means. It means really allocating some of that money into different resources, whether it be mental health issues, and whether it be mental health training and things like that. What are your thoughts on that whole deal there? Anybody can jump in.
Well, absolutely, it's necessary and needed. I'll jump first. It's necessary, and it's needed. I happened to be at police headquarters when that went down. And this is
you made it out alive? No, I'm kidding. I'm sorry.
What did you say, Chris?
I said, and you made it out alive, man.
Yeah, that time. But so I happened to be there, and this is what began to. My mind was already shifting, but this is what made the shift for me. And I want you to. This is exclusively for your show. This is what made the shift for me. I just happened to be there. And when it went down, and I wasn't getting all the details as of yet, but evidently the people I was talking to had, and they said this to me, quote unquote, "This is a war on cops." And I said to myself, being able to be more transparent, being able to be held accountable for the money that you spend in our communities is a war on cops. That speaks to the culture, condition, and climate that's within the Kansas City Police Department.
That's against you.
And I knew then I couldn't stay in partnership with that. There's no way in the world I could stay, nor my brothers could stay in partnership with that. If that's the mindset, when you look at how it's been reallocated, or where the money was pulled from to be actually given back, none of that money was pulled from Northland police divisions. I don't even understand why the Northland is even raising hell. It doesn't even make sense to me. It was pulled mostly from East Patrol, Central, and Metro. You know, almost 30 million of that 40-something million were pulled from that area south of the river. So if anybody was going to make some noise, it should have been black and brown folks.
Yeah.
You know, they ought to be arguing and say, okay, we arguing over maybe 2 million coming back to our black communities when it's 30 million.
Right.
You know, that's an argument within itself. You know, how could we reallocate 30 million in a better way to help our communities than there's maybe 2 million or 1 million that crumbs from the table that you're going to kick to us just to try to appease us? So I'll start it off there.
You know, my mama used to have a saying back in the day, and it was like, you know, on hungry days, she used to tell us put 2 pieces of bread together and make an air sandwich. And the way I look at the police department right now and people up north is that they don't even want us to have an air sandwich. You know, we're not asking for a bunch of meat. We're just asking for a simple sandwich, you know what I mean? And so that's an issue, but more of an issue is like the display of police incompetence at this point right now. At 35th and Armour, or Troost, there were 3 police cars that had a collision with one another addressing a call. To me, that's incompetent, you know, and then the police report, you know, you got the citizens account, which said 3 police officers, and you have the police report who says there were only 2 officers in this collision. Mind you, a couple of days or maybe a week before that, a police officer accidentally shoots a firefighter. If these are not issues that says that you have some incompetent police officers in your department, I don't know what is. See, I'm not a person that really screams reform as much as I scream get the dirty cops and the dirty individuals out of the bucket so the whole bucket won't continue to be tainted. I scream that before I scream reform. Let's get the bad seeds, let's weed it out, and then let's go in there and lay a new foundation. But until we do that, the police reform and anything they consider police reform is not really a reform. It's just like the old saying of reconstruction of slavery. And now we have tons of Black men in prison doing cheap labor. It's the same thing.
Same thing.
I don't mince words, you know.
Go ahead, Brother Cecil.
This is a lot of time, so I'm going to unpack as much as I can as quickly as I can. So, Mayor introduced an ordinance that passes quickly, where $44 million goes to the police. That's where the money's going. The money's going to the police, not going anywhere. It's just going. But he just announces and makes an ordinance saying that this money will have more of an influence of city. The city will have more of an influence when it comes to this money. Upon analyzing and talking to not just both sides, I hate using the term both sides of the aisle, but across the spectrum of understanding, we're from the Northlander to those who live east of Troost. The ones that I sided with the most were the ones who were confused and didn't know what was going on. Because the majority of organizations that I know of that consider to be abolitionists are not excited about this new ordinance based on the fact that it really doesn't do anything. If anything, it increases the police budget by sending $3 million to the academy. Who says that himself? He'll tell anybody, and he does. But even more to the point where we have the aspect of budgetary process. We have the process. We have procedural aspects. We have policy. A lot of people in this space struggle with the comprehension or the understanding of how their system operates. And to be like, we use these terms, these words, and I like you said, Chris, in the aspect that we need to be able to define these words. Well, as an abolitionist, I ask for the definition of policing and police, because based on what you're telling me, what is policing, what has been policing ever since the origins of policing, that is something that abolition steps in the place of, because it needs to be dismantled, not just defunded or de-invested, but dismantled. And I mean dismantled in the aspect of addressing the policies and procedures that perpetuate the same things that provide qualified immunity, things that perpetuate the 48-hour rule, that perpetuate only having one social worker at every police station, when you know that there is a crisis that happens in the perpetual places, where you have a chief that talks about having a warrior and guardian mentality, and he can't tell you who he's guarding or who he's warring against. The issue becomes, the issue of the budget becomes an issue of policy. In this aspect, it's not a good look for Lucas on both sides, on both ends. He'd be getting it from both sides, from those who consider themselves to be in movement space and those who consider to be wanting to substantiate the police. But in order for this to happen, you have to be able to eat the elephant one bite at a time, as my comrades would say. I say all this to say that I understand that there is a process in which that was laid out probably to more city council officials and more through the city manager in regards of what the next steps are, and those next steps that may have not been given to the public as of yet. But in the aspect of what we need to advocate for is advocating for the change in policy that changes the budgetary process that allows that money to be able to be spent equitably. The biggest issue that I have right now is that education receives cents, where $300 million will go to building a new Jackson County courthouse, where we give cents to education. As a person who is an advocate for education, that's my biggest argument, is that if your budgetary process is not based on your performance, such as education, if a teacher does a bad job, that teacher don't keep that job. That district don't do a good job, that teacher don't have no job because there's not money for that teacher, because it's been taken, because that money is based on, the money that they receive is based on the evidence-based practices in which they do. Policing, if we create it to where where their money is based on a budgetary process, where it's based on evidence-based practices, based on data that's been gathered in regards of how effective they are in the communities that they serve, especially the ones they're warring in, then you won't see policing. You see something different. So I don't want everyone to get tied up in the word of abolition or reformist, because to be a true abolitionist is to see something dismantled and to have something in place that actually needs to be there. And right now, if what people are advocating for in the Northland is policing and police, then there's no logical person can be with it. But I say, yeah.
I think two things that I would say that stuck. One thing that stuck out that you said, Cecil, and also Pastor Edwards. First off, as a system, systems are. It's like a machine. It's a system. It's a thing. It's a way that things run. It's a way that things are formulated. And in order to fix a system, you have to reboot the system. You have to put new hardware in it. You can't just put a baby doll or a sticker on top of it and expect that it'll change the face of it, but it won't change the system in and of itself. And also, what Pastor Edwards said was, man, that was tough to hear. For you to be there and for them to say, this is a war on police. That's tough because, we've in the Black community always felt like we've been warred against, so now when you put these type of steps in the police have this mentality that, okay, it's a war against police. Now in their mind, it's us against them. You're voting to defund the police. You're voting, not you guys in general, but you're voting to defund the police. We're getting money taken away. We're already on pins and needles because we don't have very much money. Where, police officers are, supposed to be the police officer, the security guard, the counselor, the guy that gets the cat out the tree, this. You know what I'm saying? In their minds, I'm assuming is, we're overworked, we're overpaid, and now you're going to take our money our money away from us. It's the mentality is that's troublesome for them to even think that, it's a war against police officers.
It's a war against their system. The system, like you may have heard the term, like they're.
But if they don't see it as far as it being a war against the system, if they think it's against them personally, then that's the way that they're going to see it, regardless of how it's broken down to them. And I think that they need to really understand it's the system, it's the culture of policing. It ain't the person themselves. You can add 1 million police officers to whatever arena, but if you don't fix what's going on, it doesn't matter.
So can we just call a thing a thing? I mean,
absolutely.
The history of policing just says that it was put there to keep us in place. It was there to protect property and not people. I mean, it was there to protect the livelihood of the former slave owner from retaliation from people who assumedly thought they were free. And in that era, there were the Jim Crow laws as well that kept Black people in place. These are seemingly the same measures that are happening, only there's just with a more lethal, penetration to us. You're no longer seeing us hanging, although in Mississippi, they still hanging us from trees. So they have different tactics, and all of them still come from the history of Willie Lynch, that letter of what it takes to keep Black people in control. If only Black people would realize what this country was and what they were to the country. We are this country. We're the fabric of it. Everything you're using, everything you're looking for it, identifying around you come from Blackness. And it was stolen and copyrighted and patented and washed out by white people and corporations. And it continues to happen day by day. Every time we invent something, we sell out, to the corporation. They in turn sell us out even more. We sell our people out in prison by buying this stuff over and over again. We have to stop the cycle, the perpetuation of stupidity. We really do. And I call it a perpetuation of stupidity, because a lot of us know better, but we still go out here and buy Adidas, even though we know they put shackles in the shoes. We'll still go out here and buy Nike, even though we know they ain't supporting us for real. There are still people who are suffering from their deceased loved ones. We let people go and exploit our dead loved ones over and over again. And it's really time out for that. We really need to think about how our dollar circulates and how people participate in our lives. And they're not doing it fairly. It's not becoming equitable. You have organization after organization that gets grant after grant while these families are still suffering. Malcolm's family probably would still suffer had it not been somebody step in and say, look, this is what needs to happen. And we don't protect each other like that. We think the boogeyman is out there gonna get us. So we don't protect each other when it comes to that. And it's time out for that. That's just my opinion. I could go. You gave me a soapbox. I'm sorry.
Listen, that's why I invited you on, because we all got a voice, man, and we got to say something. We got to speak to it. I believe that there's power in words. I believe words have power. Words have meaning, and I'm really careful of what words I choose, even when I'm speaking to my children. Words can manifest things, and I believe that. And I'm gonna ask this to Pastor. As far as like I just said about words, man, and I believe in prayer. Pastor, where's the balance between prayer and action and things like that? Because I believe prayer is definitely something that's needed. I believe prayer is effective, but I also believe that when we get up off our knees, it's time to start walking.
Thank you. There you go. For me, prayer is foundational. I mean, I don't start a day without prayer. I don't start a meeting without prayer. I don't engage with people without praying first. For me, it's foundational. But to that, I think I'm a critical lover of the church. And so I think when you guys hear me come out, I love the church. Been in church all of my life. I'm the historian of the church, the academician of the church. But I'm a critical lover of the church. And I think anything you love, you can criticize and still be in love.
Yes, sir.
And so with that being said, the church has fallen asleep in what I call unemployed faith. Unemployed faith is faith that don't work. Faith without works, James said, is dead. The church has gone big on faith, little on work. And so for years we've employed unemployed faith. Faith has been unemployed because we got to do the work. And the dynamic of ministry has changed. If anything, the pandemic has taught us. And I have Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, millennials, all that, and the nuns, all that in my church today. Have all that in my church. And here's the one thing they say from the 25-year-olds up to the 42-year-olds. Here's what they say. When are we going to do the gospel? They're to teach the gospel, preach the gospel, sing the gospel. They want to do the gospel. When we feed the hungry, guess who's there? That demographic. When we're out doing protests and activism, guess who's there? That demographic. Because they want to do what Jesus came to do: feed the hungry, clothe the naked, recover sight to the blind, reach out into the community, take God's house to your house. That's what they're about. For often the church has been about bring your house to God's house. If you don't bring your house to God's house, you ain't gonna get it. No, God's house now got to go to your house. We got to get out there. We got to get out there in the community and make these things happen. And so I'm the kind of preacher, that we got to see this thing going forward. The church that we knew is gone. Yeah. That baby is gone. And so we've got to look at what this new emerging church is going to look like. There's an old hymn that says, we're called to serve this present age. That's our calling to fulfill. We can't keep on trying to use 8-track methods with an MP4 world. Yeah. And that's what the church is doing. We popping in 8 tracks when folks live stream. Yeah. We can't do it. The generation you name
don't even know what an 8-track is. You're so right on. You're so right on.
I'm talking about the Riddell cassette tapes where you got to stick the pencil in and roll it back in. Some more.
I have no clue.
Yeah, Pastor, walk. In the words of the Migos, walk it like you're talking.
Yes, sir.
But
Chris, here's the point of that, and I want to go to Cecil. I want to get Cecil's thoughts on this.
Absolutely.
I think my preaching style is this. I can start off with Pac. I can go all the way down and pull up from the Harlem Renaissance, and then in my sermon weaving in the Pauline epistles. And so in that 20 minutes, I've gotten every demographic in my church. Because they want to know, how does Pac and Biggie figure into what Jesus is saying today?
Is it relevant?
Yes, sir.
Is it relevant?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm done. So.
I'm just gonna tag on to you. So just always framing it just a little bit different, but so there's these things called the stages of change. Pre-contemplation, which no intention of changing; contemplation, intention of changing, not changing; preparation, action, maintenance, with the upward spiral of relapse. In other words, and I'm just speaking in an aspect of thinking, feeling, behaving. And I said this the day after Legend. After Legend passed, I marched with brothers down, and one of the questions that was the main thing that was continuously said was solutions. I said this then. Anytime that I've even ever had anything to say in front of anybody other than more than 3 people, I always say this. I always say proper, contemplation without proper preparation creates ineffective action. Reason why I say that is because, we're talking about how do you move from prayer into action? Well, prayer is supposed to be preparation, if I'm correct. In the aspect of what we do in organizing, half the issues that we have in the aspect of when I say when the usual Kansassian or the usual East Sider sees action that's happening downtown, they're often against it because of the fact that the action proves either ineffective or can turn somebody off. And that's usually due to the fact of proper preparation. Even in proper preparation of addressing a family or a family of the victim, proper preparation in ensuring to communicate with other organizations that you're in solidarity with in regards to any action that someone may take off the cuff. Proper preparation in the aspect of being able to prepare an action that actually has that you can play the tape through. Now, VHS, but no, but like my whole point in this aspect is the fact that everyone always constantly talks about the aspect of being in action, and I just want to name it here. A lot of people ain't prepared for action. People want them to be, but they're not prepared because it shows because they tend not to learn from their mistakes, and they tend to repeat themselves in the aspect of how they move or how the action actually takes place. What you've seen here happen in Kansas City in the aspect of any organizing, even if you were to take the last year, is contemplation without proper preparation. What we need is we need to ensure that people are educated with the availability to know exactly what they're facing in the aspect of the oppressor. And this is the other thing that I have an issue with, is the fact that people need to understand that they're not the experts in other people's lives. Whether you're an ally or an activist, if you don't live on East Side Truth, if you're not a part of that family, you're not talking to that family, if you're not asking that family, the fact that Miss Naireen, Ryan Stokes' mother, was told that day that there was a protest on Friday, that's a problem. Yeah. So I'm just naming it here. So if we're asking the question of how do we move from prayer to action, how do we move by preparing for the action and preparing for the next steps on how we're going to maintain the action, because that's the next step after that. And if you ain't thinking about how you're gonna maintain this, then what you're doing is ineffective to begin with.
100%. Yeah, I'm gonna say this here. I know Zoom will get us here in a couple of minutes, but I interviewed some young people when a lot of the school shootings were going on, and the one thing that one of the organizers, the one thing that the lady said was, nobody's listening to us. That's the one thing she kept saying. Nobody's listening to us. You know, we're tired of, people going into the schools are getting shot up, and they're talking about gun reform, whatever the case. But the one thing that she kept saying was, Mr. Jackson, nobody's listening to us. And I think that's the cry from the kids when we listen to the music. You listen to some of the hip hop artists, when they talk about, lean, but they're also talking about the mental instability that they may have. If you go beyond the beats and you listen to the words, they're telling you how they're feeling, but oftentimes we disconnect. We think because we think okay, it's got too many cuss words, or we don't understand the mumble or whatever the case. But they're telling you exactly what they're saying in the lyrics. Like Pastor just said, you can go all the way back from the Renaissance to Tupac and to wherever, and it all ties in. It's all very relevant, and that's the scary thing, is because when we disconnect it. And people think it's so disconnected, but it's not disconnected, because you just, you have to find that bridge, that community. How can people reach out to you guys, man, if they want to get a little more information or whatever on what you guys do?
Well, I'll start first, but Chris, I want to come in this real quick on that. Everybody, the hot word was on the word I used was execution. Sometimes you got to use a word that amplifies to a tone deaf generation. We're dealing with people who are tone deaf, so sometimes we had to amplify the verbiage that we use in order. It got everybody's attention. Everybody wants to know why in the world the activists and Edwards use this word execution. Well, from our hood, from my village, anytime somebody's shot in the head, that's execution. That's personal. That's passion. That's just what that is. So, but to contact me, anybody can find us on Facebook, Darren Lamont Edwards, or you can go to our church website, believeandbelong.life, or to get to the heart of the matter is solutions4kc.com. Well, Chris, thank you for having me on today.
Man, Pastor, listen, thank you for accepting. It is my pleasure.
So, I just really want to send a unified message to the community about how we rally You know, when we go out there, let's send a straight message to Gene Peters Baker that these officers need to be indicted. They need to be charged. Let's send a message to Rick Smith and Brad Lemon, letting them know that we no longer trust them and that their seats are no longer theirs. And we're going to push as hard as we can for them to get out of there. Also, let's shout that we need the Justice Department to come in here for a federal investigation. If you plan on organizing, please let everybody know, tag each other, and let's do this thing in solidarity. Let's just change the whole climate of Kansas City for the best. And then we can start working towards some healing and making sure that, you know, our community can start building a safe environment for us all.
Perfect segue to Cecil. She said healing. Go ahead, brother.
Execution by definition is the carrying out, putting into effect of a plan, order, or course of action. So that's why we say execution. Because it was putting into effect of an order or a plan or a course of action. So that being said, I'm apparently an elected official, and I have to remind myself of that. So you can find me in Hickman Mills. I'm there often. You can also find us. Please donate to Uzazi Village under the moniker of the Kansas City Black Mental Health Initiative. You are actually donating to the availability to provide Black folks with Black therapists, up to 15 participants on a 9-week basis, and that's something that we're trying to get started. So we're taking donations. We ask that you do that. We also ask that you go and if you need any assistance with Black maternity, please go to Uzazi Village. I guess I'm doing shout outs right now. You could also, you can find us on Facebook. More to the point, also of the advocacy group in which I'm here representing, which is Time for Justice. Find us on Facebook. The truth of the matter is that change is uncomfortable. And if you want the world to change, you have to be ready to change with it. And right now, I don't see enough uncomfortable people in positions of power. I don't see enough uncomfortable people in positions of advocacy. As I stated this weekend, organizing is activism, but activism is not organizing. And we need more organizers, because with organizers who are also activists are revolutionary, because they can see the big picture, and their goal is the revolution, the change that needs to take place. I appreciate being invited here. I appreciate my co-guests. I guess I'll put it that way. I appreciate their comments and their perspective. And I'm just grateful, Chris, for inviting me to be here.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank y'all so much for being here. As the show's called Street Therapy, and that is my mission when I created the show Street Therapy, is to merge the streets and the therapists together, because I think oftentimes as a therapist don't really go to the streets, and the streets don't really go to the therapist. So it's my goal and my mission, and my mission to bring the two together so we can get healing, man. We need help, but the help got to start with us first, though. So
hey, I'm a street therapist.
Right on. Well, listen, man, God bless y'all.
I forgot to tell people where to find me at, and that's BroadwayChurch.org. And on social media, my full name is all my handles.
Say that again. I think I cut you off.
Oh, so you can reach me at BroadwayChurch.org, or my social media names are all my my handle is my name.
Beautiful, beautiful. Listen, thank y'all, man. Y'all have a blessed and productive week. Thank y'all. I know Pastor prayed for the show before it started, and we in good hands, man. So God bless y'all, and take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Walker, for having this set up, sir.